Hi, I'm Stewart, and welcome to our podcast, The More You Know. Our podcast will be looking into how the manufacture of semiconductors interacts with our everyday life. So, welcome to our podcast, The More You Know. Welcome back to our listeners. Today we have got, I always say a special guest, but this is a special guest. I have the general manager from our environmental factory in the southwest of England in a little place called Clevedon. Neil Mehta, welcome. So what do you do, Neil?
Well, I'm glad you called me special there, or did you?
Special.
I'm not sure.
Everyone's special on our
Everyone's
podcast.
Specials. Okay. As you say, I'm the general manager of product company Clevedon in the semi division of Edwards. And you probably want to know what that means.
Yeah, what does product company mean? Well, I know what it means, but our listeners will probably go, what's product company? It sounds really quite special.
Basically, the factory for Edwards, but it's so we're a factory in the traditional sense, in that we manufacture product that then goes on and is sold to our customers. But we're also like the engineering factory there, so we design, develop, test, and bring to market new products. So we're kind of the delivery hub of Edwards.
So for our listeners, what do you actually make at Product Company Clevedon?
So Product Company Clevedon, we make abatement systems that support the microchip industry. Mm-hmm. And the abatement systems basically clean up the air that's a byproduct of making the silicon wafers, and we clean up the air and make it much more environmentally friendly.
Okay.
Basically,
I have to admit, I have a bit of a soft spot for Clevedon, and especially with Edwards in Clevedon, because that's where I started my career. So working closely with the general managers, but they soon got rid of me, and here I am with my podcast. Where were you before? I think you just said earlier you'd been a year and a bit with Edwards, so congratulations. A year and 1 month, I think you said. Where were you before that? So
I'm an engineer by training, although clearly branched out into programs and general management. Many moons ago, I started work at what was then, and still is to be fair, a really high-tech company, Rolls-Royce, not the cars, aeroplane engines. And spent a lot of my time improving aircraft engines, either in range or efficiencies, or developing new engines for new aircraft. After about 27 years at Rolls-Royce, having picked up a lot of skills about how to manage high technology, high value kind of equipment, I kind of moved into a sort of interim and consultancy. Some of it was aerospace, aircraft interiors, actually worked for some airlines, but also in the medical industry, doing kind of hip replacement equipment.
That sounds good. I could do with one. I think the hip replacement's good to know you.
I know a man who can do you a deal,
Fabulous.
Stewart, when it gets to that point. Also doing environmental equipment in the oil and gas industry, and a number of other industries.
This sounds like another podcast, environmental equipment for the oil industry. That sounds like a kind of weird positioning. But you talk about products there. What kind of products do you make now?
So what we make now are actually environmental products. So we supply products to the microchip industry. Mm-hmm. So, but in the making of a microchip or a silicon wafer, there's a lot of byproducts in the form of fairly noxious gases, and certainly gases that have a high carbon dioxide equivalent that if just let escape into the atmosphere would hasten global warming and add to the whole carbon problem that we're generating on this planet. Our equipment takes those gases, puts them through a reasonably complex process of heating up to high temperatures, filtering through water baths and other filters, and cleans them up. And actually, one of the things I am most proud of is the products that come out of Clevedon every year save 20 million tons of carbon equivalency of gas. And that, just to put it into context, is about the same as almost all of Wales's annual output of carbon dioxide or carbon equivalent gases.
One of the big things recently, and I'm sure you're the same, being the general manager of in the supply chain to semiconductors, is that everyone knows about us now, isn't it? Before, no one ever heard of a semiconductor. And in particular now we've got this, Edwards, as part of Atlas Copco Group, has signed up to science-based targets. There's an unprecedented demand for semiconductor chips. Your factory currently is going through a huge expansion. How do you align environmental targets and huge expansion and more energy needed as part of that supply chain demand we're seeing all the way from the consumer?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really good question. So you're right. So on the one hand, I have a demand from my customers and from the wider business to triple output. Okay, and that does cause us to we're investing in new facilities, doubling the size of the factory space, bringing in, renting new offices, buying more parts, employing more people. And all of that potentially has an impact on our carbon footprint. And then on the other hand, we've signed up to carbon-based targets.
So I think it's the science-based target initiative, isn't it? Yeah.
Science-based targets, quite right. To reduce year on year our carbon footprint. And at first glance, those two things are a bit incongruous and fighting against each other. How can you grow your business and reduce carbon? And indeed, it's difficult. But it also gives us some opportunities.
Is opportunities another word from a general manager of, oh God, how am I going to do this?
A little bit of that. There are some oh God moments. But there are also some general opportunities there. So we're building a new factory. We're investing a lot of money in a new factory. And building a factory from the ground up gives you the ability to put in new technology. It gives you the ability to think through the factory from the ground upwards and take advantage of that building to put in some environmental measures. It doesn't solve the whole problem, but it gets us quite a way there.
What do you mean? Like, no, is it like solar panels? What are the kind of initiatives that you've been taking?
Yeah. So a number of initiatives, and solar panels are a big one. So we've designed the factory with a roof that can take solar panels on both sides and be functioning. So we've got 15,000 square meters of solar panels.
That's quite a lot
on there. Yeah, and that will give us self-sufficiency in energy up to 18% or 18% self-sufficient. So it doesn't solve the whole problem, but it gets us there. But we've also taken the advantage to do a number of other things. So already in our existing factory, we'd put in heat exchangers that take the stale air that's been in the offices and in the factory that is being exited into the environment. But we flow that over heat exchangers to extract some of the heat from that for the new fresh air that's coming in, to reduce our energy consumption, which helps on bills, but it also helps on our carbon footprint. That's in the existing factory. We've gone a step further in the new factory in retaining those heat exchangers, but also putting heat pumps in, which extracts even more of that heat from the stale air and imparts it to the fresh air that's coming in, which reduces our carbon impact even more.
How much have you got a figure? I'm putting you on the spot now. Have you got a figure how much? Because everyone's talking about using heat pumps. In fact, my wife was talking about this morning, saying the government gives you grants, etc. But how much does the heat pump actually save you in real terms?
That should reduce our energy consumption on heating by 40%.
Wow, that's quite a big saving then.
Yeah.
So what other aspects are you looking at? It rains a lot in the southwest, doesn't it? Is there any aspects of water? It's not all just about energy consumption then, is it?
So firstly, when we're looking at our environmental footprint, there's the carbon impact, and we've talked about some of the things on that already. But yeah, as you say, there's water usage. So we are at this moment putting in a great big tank which will collect the rainwater off the factory roof. Collect that, and we will use that water for toilets and grey water kind of thing. And that will save significant amounts of water that doesn't have to go through the network and the pipe work going forward.
So it's true you've built a swimming pool underneath the new factory then?
We've got a swimming pool in there, although we wouldn't like to be in it. In addition to that, actually, we've also got a retention tank. So you mentioned the southwest, it rains a lot, and it does, and we have a lot of storms. And one of the problems with that is we get overloading of the sewage system.
I'm getting worried now. You talked about toilets in the first part and the overloading the sewage system. I'm a bit worried where we're going with this, but
don't worry. Keep with it. You'll be all right. And ultimately, if the sewers get overloaded, some of that ends up getting released into the channel, into the sea, into the watercourses through the general sewage system. And me as an open water swimmer, that's not very welcome. So we have a big retention tank right next to your swimming pool in there, which releases water at a gradual rate. So even if we have a massive storm, it'll store that up and then trickle the water out into the sewage system to reduce our impact in overloading the sewers and reduce the chance of sewage water having to be released into the oceans. So
there's a big sustainability story more than just the greenhouse gas and climate change aspect of it. It's quite interesting. I know within Edwards we've just encouraging our employees to look at different ways of transport. Clevedon's not it's on the transport hub, but it's not in it's out in the countryside. What's the challenges about a factory growing and sustainably getting your employees to the factory? What are you doing about that?
Yeah, so it is very difficult. We are a shortish walk out of Clevedon. Clevedon itself is not blessed with great connectivity in terms of public transport connectivity.
I suppose that's probably a lot of the factories in the semiconductor industry, whether we're in Korea or in the United States or whatever. It's a big challenge, isn't it? Like about getting employees to your factories.
So we are doing, but we do have a train station very, very close. So, the first priority is and we do have a lot of people who live locally, who walk to work, which is the most environmental way to get to work. There are other people who live slightly further away, but within cycling distance. I myself cycle to work every day, and I live in Clevedon, and it not only helps our factory footprint, it certainly helps my well-being as well. We are supporting more cycling by supporting local initiatives like the extension of the Strawberry Line, which will put a cycle path, which will join the factory up with a train station in Yatton, just a couple of miles away. Taking advantage of the new factory build again, we're building bike sheds with EV charging points on there and combining that with a really good cycle to work scheme where you can buy traditional bikes, but also EV or electric bikes, and we'll put the infrastructure in there so to make it feasible for people to cycle to work either on a normal or an electric bike.
Will you use your solar panels to power up the EV
and
chargers?
the solar power panels will feed into to the charge points in there. We have to recognise that many people will still need to drive to work. I would prefer it for people to drive to work in the most efficient vehicle possible, and particularly electric vehicles. So we have, as part of the Edwards Group, introduced a company scheme to assist employees in purchasing or swapping out their fossil fuel car.
Employee sacrifice scheme. So
You got it.
drive to work rather than the drive to work scheme rather than the ride to work scheme.
The drive to work scheme.
I've just
In
taglined
electric.
that. In electric, yeah.
You patented that, haven't you?
yeah. It's a new campaign.
Yeah. And we will, of course, be providing 20 spaces, EV spaces, to start off with in the car park for employees to charge their EV vehicles. So even if they haven't got the facilities at home to charge up at work. And of course, we'll be using our solar panels to charge.
Yeah, 20 EV, that's quite a significant investment. That are you expecting, because you've got big car parks, so how many people actually work at the factory?
There's about 700.
So even if you converted over 50% of them to EV cars or 20%, that's still quite a significant investment with 20 EV chargers. How does that tie in with the community? Do you think there's a bigger thing that people like yourself, general managers, could bring this experience you've got with the EV charging and the bike charging? Do you think there's an opportunity for companies to bring EV charging out to the community? And what I'm thinking of is, like, we're working with Action Net Zero, as you said, one of this in the Bristol in the southwest, and their thing is about communities and EV charging, and there's an aspect that
we're exploring opportunities with organisations like Bristol Action Net Zero to how we can not only do the right thing within our own facilities, but also support our local communities in doing the right thing. For example, we may end up sponsoring EV chargers within the local community, and we would certainly support Action Net Zero and other organisations in environmental endeavours.
It's been a theme of our podcast, actually, is that there's stuff that individuals could do. There's stuff that organisations like Edwards could do, and there's stuff like what influencing government policy. What's your vision now? You've been a year and a month as a general manager. What's your vision around sustainability for your site, the product company Clevedon?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in broad terms, I think my job is to build a sustainable business. Okay, and it's sustainable in many aspects. We've talked about environmental sustainability. We've talked about, how much our product, benefits sustainability globally. But there's other aspects to sustainability. Sustainability, in essence, means we'll be here a long time. And that means all sorts of things. I've got to continue making product that our customers want, that are relevant, that our customers want at a price they can afford, and we can make some money out of it. But it also means I've got to have a sustainable workforce. So fundamentally, I've got to develop the organisation, the team, so that people continue to enjoy working there, that they're proud of the company, that they get value and motivation from coming to work. I've talked about sustainable infrastructure. Everything we do has an impact, but we can minimise that impact by thinking about how we do it. And then if you look wider than, wider than the factory gates, our local community there, are stakeholders in what we do. So we've got to be good stewards of the air and the water courses and the environment around our factory. But we've also got to be good stewards within the community. We are part of the community, and that might mean helping support some of the charities. Me and you were on a cycle ride the other weekend.
That's why I keep squirming on my seat, Neil, because of that 3-day cycle.
And we were raising money for the Children's Hospice. But the cycle ride that we both did, and we were part of a team that I'm very proud of, that we raised over £170,000 for that great cause.
Yes, my bottom's still feeling it yet, but it was an awesome, and it was sustainably done because we did it on our bikes.
We did do it, 225 miles.
15,000 feet of ascent, 20 hours in the saddle, and 5,000 calories a day, I think, with that we ended up consuming.
I think we burnt 5,000. Yeah. I took in about 8, but there you go.
And 3 bee stings. But that's a story for another day. Yeah. The bees in the southwest like jelly babies, but we'll discuss that another time. We've been chatting today. Really interesting discussions. What would be your key takeaways for our listeners, for our general managers, or for anyone who's running an establishment that could contribute? What would their key takeaways be?
I think building a sustainable business takes a holistic approach. There's no one thing you can do. I think you have to take the opportunities when they arise. Like I've explained about, we're building a new factory, so we are taking environmental methodologies and equipment in the infrastructure side. You've also got to invest in your people, encourage and cajole people into taking individual activities there. You've also got to invest in your product, about how you can develop the product and your test processes and the material and your supply chain to be more sustainable in its wide sense. And you just have to look at these things in a holistic sense. And I'd say anyone in my sort of position with a little bit of power to make change, I can't say it better than Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility.
I think on that final quote, I think, Neil, you've captured it in one great statement. So here's to sustainability and here's to Spider-Man. Thank you, Neil, for today. I really appreciate it. It's been a great chatting to you, and hopefully speak to you in the future.
Yeah, I'd love that, Stewart. Yeah, take care.
Cheers.